Five Nights at Freddy's, Clawmarks-Chapter 3. Max sat down in a leather chair inside the security office and stared over the monitors. Everything was as it should have been. Good. He reclined back, closing his eyes. He didn't know why Larry complained so much. This job didn't seem too hard, although it did cut into sleep hours. No matter. He was getting paid double for this anyhow. With a yawn, Max switched the camera feed to the stage. Vicky was missing from her normal spot. No problem, Max thought, but she wasn't showing up on any of the other monitors. He leaned forward, looking intently for her. A few loud taps in the right window startled Max as he hit the door button. Thankfully, it didn't stall, slamming shut with a boom. He switched on the light to see who was there. Vicky stared in at him, her tail calmly waving in that predatory motion Max didn't trust. "Hey," he called soothingly to the animatronic. "Go back to your stage." "Actually, I'd much rather come in." Max jumped clear out of his seat. "Did you just speak to me?" Vicky smiled, flashing her rows of glimmering, pointy teeth. "That's right. Please open the door. I've got to tell you something important." Max stubbornly shook his head. "No, you're going to go all nightclub mode on me." The animatronic flinched. "What? You're disgusting." She clenched her fist, shaking violently. Vicky looked scarier than ever like this. The man crossed his arms. "Why should I trust you? It's pretty obvious you don't like me." Vicky drummed her claws on the window panel. "Good point," she said. "We did start off on the wrong foot, but can't we just start over? What I have to say will change your perspective on everything. Please?" Max hesitated before walking to the door. "No funny stuff, understand? I'm armed," he warned. Vicky nodded. "Okay." Max opened the hydraulic door, and Vicky slowly stalked into the office. They stared each other down for a while, Max keeping one hand on the pistol and the other in a defensive position so she wouldn't tear his face off. Vicky nervously kept her distance, unsure of what he'd do. Certainly this guard wasn't someone to mess with. After an intense silence, Max spoke up. "Okay, now what is it?" He didn't take his eyes off her. Vicky said, "You may not realize it, Max, but everything you know about Afton and us animatronics is a lie." Max gave her a confused look. True, he had had suspicions about Will before. But what could this creation of his know that Max didn't? "Go on," he replied. Vicky continued, "William Afton is a monster. He just wants everyone to think he's a dedicated, hard-working employee so he can cover up what his real business is. Shady doesn't begin to cover it. He gets away with the most unspeakable crimes, evil inside out. Yet Afton had enough trust in me to tell me about his sins. He told me that back in '83 he had a test, one that ended in blood and tears, one involving Circus Baby. She was considered the most advanced in technology at the time, so she was a pretty big deal. Afton was very proud of her, almost like he is with me now. But like all of his creations, she had her imperfections." Max noticed with alarm that Vicky stepped a little closer. "What are you talking about?" he murmured, his voice level just above that of a whisper. If she attacked him, he'd pull the trigger. That was the only plan he had, and if it didn't work... Max gulped, sweating profusely. Vicky caught on to his fear and inched closer. "Sometimes I don't know," she replied, eyeing the gun. "I often gather information from possibly biased facts. But Max, he wants to control us. I can sense a major event getting closer with every passing second. Even now, my programming is screaming at me to kill you, else you spill the secret I've just shared. Yet I need your help. Afton is a child serial killer, the killer who's been murdering children around here. This will only continue unless we find a way to stop him, and I don't want to be a part of his spree." Max felt lost. Were these words of truth, or just some hoax in an attempt to get him killed? He spent many years around animatronics, and he picked up on things normal people couldn't. Max understood how crafty they were. "Not the talker, huh?" Vicky asked, backing away. "I understand if you don't want to do this. You're no hero. You can just sit back like everyone else and let William do what all scumbags like him do. After all, what's the point in interfering? It's not like you can help the rest of us." Max interrupted. "I'll do it if we find evidence. But what's in it for me? Psychological damage, perhaps?" Vicky chuckled. "I'm afraid not. Even if you just confronted Afton on the matter, I'll offer you my protection." "From what?" Max asked. Vicky gestured toward the left door. Max hit the light button, and to his horror, Bonnie stood there, jaws agape. Max slammed the door, lightning fast. When he turned back to Vicky, she was holding his gun. The animatronic emptied out the bullets, saying, "There's souls inside all of us. Souls of undead children who are angry, scared, confused, and vengeful." She threw the gun out of the office and murmured, "They take most adults as a threat, killing nearly every night guard that happened to be around." I'll keep them at bay for you." Max felt completely exposed without his gun. He stared at Vicky, who coldly smiled back. "So, do we have a deal?" she growled. He stammered, "Yes, Vicky, deal." Vicky grinned, patting his shoulder. "Good boy," she purred. "Listen carefully. Stay under William's radar. Experienced killers such as himself know suspicion when they see it, and he's not the type to take sleuthing very lightly." Max sighed, not knowing what he got himself into. He wasn't a detective, but he'd certainly tried to see what was going on. Yes, Afton was being very weird lately, but if anything Vicky said contradicted what was actually going on, he'd quit the night shift. Vicky pulled out a serrated pizza cutter that she must have concealed inside her dress. "Another thing. Don't let poor depressed Henry know what you're up to," she whispered. Max scooted away, staring at her weapon. Okay, he choked, terrified. Vicky laughed. "I'm not going to hurt you, Maxie. Just don't screw things up and I'll think about sparing you a few lacerations." Max groaned as Vicky sat on the floor next to him. During the 6-hour shift, Max nearly dozed off a couple of times, since he wasn't used to working so late. Vicky kept him awake by digging her claws into his leg. All the while, Max thought about what she told him about Henry. The manager had no reason to be depressed, or so Max felt. Henry had a young daughter at home, Charlie. According to Henry, she was what kept them going after the divorce. Her Aunt Jen babysat her while Henry went to work every day. Bonnie and Chica seemed to be the only ones that tried to get into his office that night. The others remained in their places. The clock soon chimed 6 a.m. As Max stood up to leave, he said, "That was easy." Vicky followed him. "Easy compared to what you'll endure for the rest of the week," she muttered. "They were just testing you." Max asked, "For what?" "Weaknesses," Vicky replied. "Studying the strategies you use every night, and how to squirm their way through your mistakes. Most people don't really take this job unless their career was dying." When they got to the front door, Max heard Henry's car pull up. Vicky headed for the stage. "It's time for me to go into sleep mode now," she said. "See you tomorrow night, Max." Soon after she left, Henry walked in. "Good morning," he boomed. "And good job, Max. I kind of expected this place to be on fire when I got back." William came in after him, still wearing that purple outfit. Sunken eyes and all. Max remembered what Vicky told him, but this was scary. How was he to do this without getting caught? Then he remembered what might happen if he failed. Afton didn't say a word as he walked past Max and Henry, coughing horribly as he walked straight to the back room. Foxy was still out of order. Then again, William seemed to have given up altogether on him. "I thought he was your favorite," Henry often mused. Every time, Afton said, "He is. It's just nobody else likes him." Even with the curtains closed, one could catch a glimpse of Foxy's tarnished silver hook poking out, as if he was ready to pull them back when least expected. Max himself never really put much thought into repairing Foxy, sadly. The children were more interested in the animatronics that were still operational. Still, being an engineer was his part-time job, so Max asked Henry if he could work on the character for the following week. He mostly wanted to use it as an excuse to work closer with William and search for clues. That way it wouldn't seem too strange when it came time to ask Afton a few questions. Henry gave his consent, and soon Max was spending personal time with Foxy. It was quite dark in the cove, so the man had to put a flashlight in his mouth while fixing the pirate. Every now and then the fox's snout twitched or his eyes lit up, but the robot didn't move an inch. "Come on, Foxy, you can do it," Max whispered, trying to unstiffen some of the rusty limb joints with a can of oil. But Foxy only creaked in response, as if that was all he could do. "Need some help?" Max whirled around and saw Will standing there. Yeah, sure," he said, scooting over so Will could sit next to him. Max knew this was his chance, but he wasn't sure how to ask. "So, William, have you ever been with a kid before?" Afton paused for a bit, like time itself had stopped working. Finally he said, "If you want to count that time I had to pull that boy's arm from the cotton candy machine." They were both quiet before Will continued. "I did have my own kids once, you know." Max had no idea about this. "What were their names?" he asked. William snapped, "It doesn't matter." With that he got up and left the cove. Max felt stupid, knowing he struck a nerve with Will. Still, maybe this piece of information could spare his throat from Vicky. The engineer spent the rest of the day trying to figure out what was wrong with Foxy, and found that one of his gears were cracked. A fixable, yet expensive problem. At around mid-noon, a loud crash was heard from the backstage area. Max was the only one in the pizzeria who seemed to notice and decided to investigate a little. Walking into the room, he heard Afton's voice. "Okay, which one of you bucket of bolts tipped over this bench? This was a very pricey endoskeleton piece, I'll have you know." William was shouting at Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Vicky. They were all lined up, staring at the mess of metallic pieces littering the floor. Or at least, what was left of the 2-year-old endoskeleton that normally sat upright on the bench. It was hardly ever used anyway, so it shouldn't have been that big of a deal. But it also was kind of odd to interrogate a robotic children's man. Max hid around the corner and listened. "Well, come now, who did this? If nobody steps forward right now, there'll be consequences," Will huffed, glaring at them. The animatronics all looked at each other, Vicky noticeably looking uncomfortable. Her tail wasn't doing its usual side-to-side sway. Now it was slumped down, in regret. "Oh no," Max whispered. Right when it seemed Afton knew who the guilty one was, Freddy stepped up. Slowly and deliberately, the bear walked up to his creator. Afton shifted his gaze to him. "Freddy, huh? I thought you knew better. You know I've got to punish you now," he scolded. With that, Will grabbed Freddy's arm and scratched it with his pocket knife. The bear grunted in pain, but just watched as the man walked away. Then he turned to Vicky, shaking his head. She looked ashamed and ran off. Though Max found this episode strange, it was actually, to a small degree, normal for Will to talk to his animatronics. But this didn't matter right now. He was more concerned about what Vicky would do if she wasn't happy about the conversation with Afton. After the customers left, Max talked with Henry. "I was wondering if you'd let me finish the rest of the week as night guard, Henry," he said. "I'll be fine as long as I get the weekend off. Plus, you don't have to pay me a dime extra. You can use the money you have to get an extra gear for Foxy. I'll be okay." "Well, it isn't exactly legal for someone to work that many hours, but—" Henry pondered, then said, "Okay, Max. I like your way of thinking. You kind of remind me of my younger self." Henry ruffled Max's hair playfully, then bid him good night. Will muttered something under his breath as he took his leave as well. Time to finish what Larry started, Max thought. As he cleaned up the place a bit, he felt Vicky come up behind him. "You better not have done anything stupid," she growled. Max hoped not either.